Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
Oh my goodness, it's so nice to meet you virtually.
All right. Nice to meet you too.
My name is actually not David Horn. Let me change
Okay.
it.
Hello and behold.
My name's Reagan. So nice to meet you. Can I call you Ani? Is that all right?
Yes, absolutely. Nice to meet you, Reagan.
All right. This is a special edition episode of the show I host, Raydio Room, where we interview musicians from New York. You are honestly our most legendary guest that we've had.
All right.
I'm so excited to be talking to you today. All right. So hold on. Let me just rename myself real quick. Reagan Grant. And today we'll be talking about um, Donna Flores' documentary, 1-800 on her own. Um, a documentary based on your life as a musician and your journey. I understand you're on tour right now. How has the tour been for it?
It's been great. It's been really great. The vibe is really high at the shows. People are so happy to gather together with other, like-minded souls.
Right.
Um, and whatever, feel a little bit of hope and a little bit of, you know, yeah, just feel each other.
Yes, feel each other, the connection. Um, Let me scoot back a little bit. I got excited. If you could just introduce yourself.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Well,
yeah. My name is Ani DiFranco, folk singer at large.
you're at large. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. And um, the film originally came out, in June 2024. Um, and right now, like as I said, it's touring. It will be having its New York debut in April, in a few days, April 14th. So if you could describe the documentary in just one sentence, what would you say?
Real.
Hmm.
That's one word, I guess. I could have used some more. Yeah, just um, I mean it's just there, yeah, I didn't, there was nobody shining me up for this. Um, Having a camera around. Dana just hung out for a year or more, two, I don't know, and just sort of filmed my life as it went by. And then there's some, a bunch of historical, whatever was in the vault, footage as well, to kind of play against. But yeah, it's my life a few years ago. You see the pandemic hit, while she was busy filming. So you see, what that ride was like for me. And yeah, it's just it's very real, I think.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny actually too. Last night my friends and I were talking about the pandemic and like reliving some memories and how tough, like, and how bizarre that time was.
Yeah.
Just thinking about it again. Um, but in now in today's time, like, why would you think that this film, or why would you say that this film is important, in this moment in time right now?
Hmm. Well, um, I mean, it's the story of an independent artist, myself, of course, but making their way in the world without trying to sell out to big, the music industry or big business that doesn't have the same ethic, the same reason for being in the world. Um, and so you sort of see the struggle of it. It's also very much a story about an artist who's also a mom, and just a person trying to spin all the plates, balance, that sort of impossible equation that so many people are faced with to give 110% here and here and here and here, Um, so, I've heard from people. I haven't really seen the documentary myself because
Hmm.
it's too much for me to look at, you know. Um, but I've heard from other people that, they feel very seen through it, or that, they can relate to that struggle of just having way too many places that are meaningful to put your energy and your love.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I can totally understand why like it might be weird watching yourself for like an hour and some change for so long. Yeah,
Yeah.
for
No, thank you.
yeah, for sure. And that kind of your answer also kind of leads me into like my next question. You mentioned like um having to juggle a lot. That I'm sure that's something that, you know, anybody on the planet can really relate to. I'm sure everyone always has like 40,000 things on their plate at once that they're,
Yeah.
you know, get by. So outside of like the documentary or outside of the perspective of the documentary, but just from your own personal experience, like how would you say like your journey as a musician could relate to kids coming of age or like kids in college like myself?
Yeah. Man, I don't envy you coming of age in this age,
Yeah.
in so many ways. I just feel like the stakes are so much higher, for you and your generation. Just I guess mainly what I'm trying to say is that when I started out, I kind of hit the road and started performing and being a public person in 1990 and so I had a good decade before the internet, you know, to become myself and take risks and make all those mistakes that go along with that journey. And, you know, in today's world, it's like everything you do and say and wear and think has to be cool with everybody, everywhere, forever,
Wow.
or you're in trouble. And I think that's an inhuman burden to put on, especially young people who need to stretch and grow and stumble and fall and learn. And, I mean, I'm still learning and I'm still making mistakes. And, these days, like I said, the stakes are so high. I feel like I don't know what I would have done if I was your age and trying to get out there and say things that and do things and try things and um, it's way more intimidating as each day goes by, and I feel like it's a real deterrent to a lot of young people, and I get it. I've got an 18-year-old daughter, and I just I I think a lot of young people feel like, why would I put myself out there when I know what's going to happen next, and it's not going to be pretty. And I get that very much. So, man, I wish you all just a superhuman amount of courage as you make your way.
Thank you. Everyone needs a little dose of courage. Every
Yeah, yeah, these days, that's right.
Um, and yes, it's very true. In this day and age, you know, the microscope is so zoomed in. But even too, like in the 90s, I'm sure like being a public figure also definitely had like its challenges, like always having like a lot of eyes on you. Um, so and that might have I'm sure it might have been intimidating in some regards if I don't know if I'm right, but
Sure, yeah.
and especially um not only as a woman but as a loud and proud feminist, you know, a lot of people don't like it when women open their mouths and speak up and are proud of everything that they're saying and their messages that they're spreading. And also as a bisexual woman as well, you know. Um so going on that journey and having all those facet parts of yourself, um with those eyes on you, did it ever feel like did you ever have moments where you might have felt like you needed to hide a little bit? And how did you like overcome that?
Oh yeah, totally. Um, yeah, and as you know, I'm sure, the further you go back, the less room there was for anybody coming from anywhere else than you know, the same old perspective. there was just a lot of pushback, a lot of pushback, from the patriarchy in a word, just when I started singing and the songs I was writing, and I was really, the media turned me into a caricature, and they basically, anytime they wrote about me, it was, angry, hairy lesbian, who makes music just for other angry lesbians, that was the story. And it really excluded a lot of people, from feeling welcome, from coming to the show. The media was, and it was such an excruciating process, that every interview I did all, throughout the 90s and was with somebody who had no idea where I was coming from, no idea what culture, subculture um, I was born out of. And it was like so kind of exhausting to try to translate myself on a daily basis to,
Yeah.
the dominant culture and explain myself and justify myself. And I wanted to hide just so much of the time. Um, but I guess one thing I had going for me, and one thing that I wish again upon all young people now, is that I just kept coming back around to, what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how they see me, how they define me, what they call me, what they say. What matters is what I decide matters, and my purpose is what I imagine it to be. And whether they get it or not, or whether they have a kind word, or whether they're just constantly trying to push me off to the side and marginalize me and everything that I'm trying to speak about, that doesn't matter. I always had this feeling like I'm going to outlive this story that they're telling. And I feel like I have.
Yeah, absolutely. Which you also have like a very loyal fan base as well, which I think is kind of like speaks to the type of crowd and the type of people that like alternative scenes draw in. I feel like people who appreciate alternative styles of music um have a lot more open mind have a more open mindset and are very a lot more receptive to different people in general.
Mm,
So, you know, as you said, like you're born out of, different types of subcultures and so on and so forth. Um, Being a feminist, being in the scene, you are like a trailblazer. So with this loyal following and being the trailblazer that you are, like how did that feel in the 90s and how does that continue to feel now, having this such a loyal band of supporters?
yeah. I mean, it feels better every moment and year that goes by, because it's like a long-term relationship now, between me and a lot of the people who have been listening for all these decades. And we've been through a lot. One thing that I hear a lot now in life is from people that I meet is, man, I was there for every step, on kind of on a parallel journey. You zigged, I zigged, I zagged, you zagged, whatever all the things were, um, becoming yourself, and then experiencing heartbreak and becoming a parent and blah, 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 all the things that life um, throws us into. And so feeling like, um, I mean, I guess there's just this shared life now that I've had with so many listeners where we have accompanied each other. My songs accompanied them on their journey, and then their affirmation and gratitude and their presence, them welcoming my songs into their life and giving my songs a place to go and a place to live in this world, has accompanied me. And so it's been this beautiful, not always easy, but long-term relationship that feels very meaningful now. I think especially because I never, had sort of pop success. I never had a hit on the radio. I never had a whatever, all the things, so the people that have come to my music and have hung around, they found their own way, you know, and the expression live by the sword, die by the sword. So because our relationship wasn't based in some kind of marketing or commercial sphere, it doesn't end there. It goes really deep. It's real personal.
Yeah.
So I feel really grateful now. It was hard to stay on my independent path,
Mhm.
and watch people around me, just sort of zoom past me. I had all these experiences of, one day somebody would be opening for me in a bar, and then a year later they'd be on the cover of all the magazines, and I'd be back in that bar, And that, it takes so many years to build an audience kind of on your own and out there in real time. But like I said, I think at the end of the day, it's so much more stable
Yeah.
and the foundation of that relationship. And so I feel really, really lucky now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting you mentioned too, like the sticking to the independent artist beat. Like I just want to dig a little bit into that a little deeper. Like was the was the attraction of like the commercial and the more, I guess, corporatized. Is that a word? Corporatized?
Sure. Yeah.
Corporatized.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make it a word
I
now.
understand it
Yeah.
anyway. Let's make up words.
The corporatized like side of music. Did was there like a temptation there ever?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Very much. I mean, especially back in the day when life was hard, and I didn't have any money and I was, in the beginning, I didn't have any help, by the time I could afford my first sound guy and sort of any help on the road, I was almost at a quitting point. I was just too exhausted and it was too hard showing up by myself, at whatever, bar after bar, club after club, trying to interface with the house sound guys who, by and large, were very territorial. They were very, it was hard. I had to just smile my way into their good favor just to try to get people to work with me, not against me. And it was just so much of trying to get over, in this world that was not all that inviting. Um, so it was exhausting, and I often had to question my methods, my idea of my path and reaffirm it. Um, but I guess there was just something, and I did have offers to go the other route, the label route and such, but that always just made me feel icky, you know? There was just something in my stomach. I'm a big believer in the gut brain.
Yeah.
I think science teaches us up until really recently that our brain resides in our head. And I think that there is a second brain that resides in our gut. And tuning out that intelligence is to our own and the world's peril. I think, anyway. So I always at least knew that much what, to move towards my teachers and away from that which made me feel, unethical.
Mhm.
So it was just a gut thing, like the whole industry world, when I would go to their offices or I'd have the lunches or I mean, they were perfectly nice people and wanted to help in their own way. But I had a gut reaction that told me, no, it's
Yeah.
wrong place for you.
Yeah. Because especially sometimes at big labels, you know, the puppeteer might come out just a little bit, even if it's not like on a large scale. I respect like the commitment to staying true to your own art and having, the all the authority over the art that you make, because, labels might try to, craft you into your own.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, in retrospect, I could have used some crafting. It would have been nice to have the team of experts in the room, to help me make recordings, albums, to help me translate my songs to the world. There would have definitely been upsides and benefits. And sometimes I look back at my records and they're really, they're, and,
So
specific to me in a moment and whatever trip I was on. Um, and I have regrets, I have regrets like, ah, man, there's another good song that I didn't make a good document of, and I could have done it justice. Um, but I didn't, I was learning. I was finding my way. I was making my own mistakes. Um, but I think that again, in the end, now that I've made it this far, I feel like, you know what, better to make my own mistakes, and have my own self to blame instead of anybody else, and my records might not always be, the most polished or well put together things, but they're just real. They're just real. And it seems as though the people that needed the songs were able to listen through the sound or the delivery or something and get what they needed out of it. So I try not to question my choices too much.
absolutely. I think even if there's unpolished parts, it's real. And I also, to go back to like your earlier point too, with um, you know, relaying a message to kids coming of age and college students, like the mistakes are gonna happen. They're gonna happen. So I think it's um the honest admission that, you acknowledge that there are some rough parts there, is that's real. And I really appreciate that answer. That was a great answer. Um, and speaking of college, uh, during my last semester, in my women in media class, we watched the documentary The Righteous Babes. Shout out to my professor, Jessel Kapadia. And there are some heavy hitters, some, excuse my French, but badass women in that documentary, including yourself, Skin from Skunk Anais, or Skunk Anansi, sorry.
Yeah, yeah,
Anais for some reason, Anansi, like the spider.
yeah.
Tori Amos and Sinead O'Connor. So, and the documentary kind of explains having women carve space into the music scene and the rock scene. So, from your perspective, like, why do you think women's voices are essential to like alternative music scenes? Why should women like plant their flag in these spaces?
Oh my gosh. Well, uh, so that we can have peace on earth. I mean, I honestly, just to zoom out, just even bigger than music, of course, like until women are at the table, every single table, we're not going to get it right, any of it. I think women's voices, their sensibilities, their lived experience is essential to human culture, art, society, politics, everything. So yeah, I've always felt that feminism is not just for women. It's not. It's for all humans, because I think that addressing patriarchy, which is, I sort of, to my mind, the fundamental imbalance from which all other imbalances are born. I believe that until we address patriarchy effectively and liberate, um, let's just say the feminine sensibility in humankind, which is not exclusive to women or whatever you want to call, people with reproductive systems, or um, it's a part of the human psyche and the human intelligence that has been suppressed within all of us and within all societies globally. And as long as that trend continues, I think we will make bad decisions, that turn into things, like racism and heterosexism and climate disaster and all of the I think all of these diseases are born first and foremost of patriarchy. We can never uh, get to peace on earth from a fundamental imbalance. So, I mean, cultural aspects are just as important, as politics and laws. Um, what people how they think and how they feel and what inspires them and what the culture that surrounds them is so much a part of what becomes the possibilities for each of us. So, yeah, just women in the room, man. Women, not just on the mic, but women with instruments, women, laying down the backbeat, like women at every level of human discovery is what it's going to take for us to get to the place where we can start making better decisions.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, I feel like culture culture dies or art reflects the times that we're in, all the time. And I feel like if the art and the culture is only being funneled through one perspective, now that's when we start getting into dangerous territory.
Mm.
Speaking of art and, releasing it to the world.
Mm.
You take inspiration from a lots of different genres, like musically. Punk, one of your answers earlier to I can't remember verbatim what you said, but the whole time I was thinking, I was like, damn, that's such like a punk rock answer. Like that's
Oh.
but punk, hip hop, jazz. Um, but your music is very folk rock centered, I believe. So why is folk rock your lane? Why did you choose to go down that genre? And why does that genre do you think is the best way to convey your stories?
um, I'm not sure if I chose it. I think it chose me. It found me. When I was a kid, I had this friend in Buffalo where I grew up. I was 9 when I met him, and he was 30, whatever. And he was a folk singer, a songwriter. And I became his shadow as a kid, and he taught me the craft, the life. He taught me it all, and he brought me in to the circle, and he introduced me to all kinds of other songwriters. And so, I guess first and foremost, I'm a songwriter. I think that maybe more than anything is my superpower. That has helped me to connect with people. And I was coming out of, I'm not from a musical family, and I had no connections to anything or anybody except for my friend Michael and, other people playing around in bars in Buffalo. And so because I was very much on my own, as the documentary is called, um, I had to just, a guitar is a really good tool to make a song happen all on your own that you can sing to. So yeah, it just was my circumstance and where I came from. And when I sort of early on got onto the folk circuit, um, which includes all these independent, um, sort of community minded, community connected, political promoters and little indie label owners and these festivals that I found myself at right away. They're, folk roots music. It was just people's music from all over the world. And um, I just found my people, people who are trying to make sub corporate music that uplifts, that tells the story that's not being told. You know, um, these were the people that I found on the folk and roots underground. So that was always where I felt most comfortable. And when I got a little more popular, towards the end of the 90s, I found myself kind of crossing over and at these big rock festivals, or on the TV shows, or in the dabbling in the sphere of more commercial music or something. But I didn't find as many teachers in that realm as I did when I was, out there with like Pete Seeger and Utah Phillips and, you know, Odetta. And I mean, I met a lot of the greats, from radical people's music along the way, because I'm sort of this cusp generation. I was just old enough to meet some of that old guard, and they're super cool people. Like Pete Seeger had a really magical presence, just a kind of a Buddha like vibe. When he came in the room, everything got cooler. People dropped their egos a little bit and focused a little more on what's important. And he had this very kind, very open, and I was like, that's what I want to be when I grow up. So I knew when I got into that world, just by the fact of my acoustic guitar and my homespun songs, this is a good world. This is the place for me.
Um, that's beautiful. Do you have like a specific show or like festival that, is implanted in your mind as like that was one of the greatest experiences ever that I'll never forget?
I do. There's this whole series of folk roots festivals in Canada, and I got on the circuit when I was really young. I don't know, 19, 20, and I started showing up at these festivals, and there was not a lot of young people because at the time it was like the old guard was kind of dying out and these festivals were starting to struggle. And so I brought this sort of cadre of teenagers with me, So a lot of the old guard was like, ah, oh, yes, yes, welcome. Some of them were a little more traditionalist and, not as welcoming to my whatever, shaved head, combat boots, or whatever I was about. But a lot of them got it. They were like, oh, you're the new version. Yes, come on in. Um, and there was one festival, especially out in Vancouver, the Vancouver Folk Festival, that I played every year for a bunch of years. And it was so international. It was like a world music festival. And I met and I learned so much. And a lot of my most amazing memories in my musical journey started there, at that festival where, every night they put all the performers in the same hotel, and every night there'd be a party that lasted all night and a jam session that included people from all over the world who couldn't necessarily speak to each other, um, but we could jam together. And for those like years of my life, my record collection, when I started collecting first cassettes and then CDs, was, world music. It was like Eastern European women's choirs and African guitar players and, South American, pan flute. Like we were all in the room together. Yeah, and they would throw us on stage together too in these workshops. And it was just so much fun. Like I felt like I was traveling the world, because that's what music does, right? And connecting with people from all these different cultures and places that I may never see, but it was just such a beautiful, enriching, like world expanding gift to be at, a lot of those Canadian festivals, but especially that one in Vancouver that even way back in the day, the fella who ran it was really politically on point, and he had 50% female performers. That was part of his ethic. And then it was just a really inclusive, world music gathering. And I learned a lot. I can hear influences in my songs, especially from back then, from that woman I met from Guam, and like all these people. So it was really, really, that was a gift.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. That sounds awesome. I didn't know Canada was pumping out shows like that. I'm gonna have to book a flight or to Vancouver.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if, I haven't been at the Vancouver Folk Music Festival in a while, but the folk music scene in Canada is much more sort of singer-songwritery and British Islesy. But these festivals, they were super world music inclusive. Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, and I wonder, to me it sounds like, do you think you prefer the live music experience versus like being in a studio and recording?
Oh, 136%. Yeah, just, I think that's what I am. I'm a performer. That's what inspires me. I mean, I think music fundamentally is a social act. It's a way that we share our humanity in time and space and see each other and experiencing each other. And so making recordings was not, was more of a stretch for me. Um, and I'm not sure if I've been as good at it along the way as I have been at just like showing up on stage and really like fully showing up and trying to be a part of a moment with whoever's in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of performance, um you're also multi-hyphenate. We can add actress
Yeah.
after after
Ah.
here as well. You played Persephone in Hades Town. So I'm curious, what's the difference between like a theatrical performance versus like a musical performance? Like a difference in connection with the audience? Does it make you feel different internally? Like what's that like?
Yeah, it was really different. I mean, after being on stage for 30 years, it was like I was, a newborn baby when I stepped out as Persephone. I guess, like, to sum it up, maybe I would say that performance has sort of two elements to it, the way I see it. Part of it is putting on a show, and part of it is just interacting, improvising, and I've leaned very heavily into the latter in my life and my work. And that's what I really like, is just showing up and smelling the situation. Like, what's the vibe?
Yeah.
What's the energy in the room? What is on everybody's mind? What do we got? What are we working with tonight? And just going towards that. Maybe it's really chill and sedate, and people are sitting, or it's a more reserved part of the country or other country that I'm in. And so, okay, let's do that. I'll pull out some of my quieter, more subtle stuff, and I'll embody a different part of myself and go there. And then some nights it's rock and roll, or you're at a festival and it's pouring rain or whatever, and you just amp it, you just amp it up, and you go with that energy, and you feed off that. And this Broadway thing was a different job. It was no matter what the energy in the room is, the job is to do the show. And it's like you climb the mountain and you hit that peak, and it doesn't matter if the wind's at your face or at your back, or it's raining or it's sunny or whatever, you're playing to a bunch of corpses, you do the show, you know? So that was something I sort of had to learn. Like, no, you don't go with the energy. If it's not in the room, you just pretend and you just project it outwards. And the thing that saved it for me was being surrounded by all these other people on stage, all these other badasses who, it would have been maybe impossible to do that. Like if it was a one woman show and I had to like, ta-da, fussy hands, to a bunch of like yawning people on a Wednesday afternoon, I think I would have shot myself in the head. But because there were so many other people on stage and we could feed off each other and we could have each other's back in that what sometimes was a ridiculous enterprise. But it was that kind of camaraderie. I felt after 6 months on Broadway like I had war buddies. It's like
The
intensely
trenches.
grueling. Yeah, we were in the trenches. I was in the trenches with them for a while, and so much respect, mad respect for what they do. 8 shows a week, all the stuff surrounding it, the press, the media, the social media, the rehearsals that they're constantly calling. They're very exacting. And yeah, they just work so hard. It blew my mind.
Yeah. It sounds, yeah, acting sounds intense, but yeah, I could definitely see like the perspective of like in theater, very by the book versus, on a musical stage, there's more room for the
Yeah.
flow, you know?
Yeah, and in my show, if I make a mistake or forget words or fall on my face, it's hilarious and nobody cares. In fact, people love it. They're like, "Yeah, fall on your face again." But the pressure in the Broadway situation, it was, it's like, "Nope, don't do that.
Yeah.
Get it right."
It would be a gas washes over the
Yeah, yeah.
and what's next for you, would you say? I'm sure, the creativity never stops flowing. Is there anything that like you've never tried that you want to accomplish, something that you might want to revisit and do? What's next on your radar?
Well, I got a few projects that I'm working on. I mean, one of them is a musical theater piece that I've been inventing. I mean, that's sort of part of what made me say yes to doing a stint in Hadestown was I don't know anything about theater really. I wasn't a theater nerd as a kid, so I thought I should go to school, and show up at this most mind-blowing show and learn what that's about, So it was really really amazing to be a part of that amazing show and learn a lot. Um, so I'm working on a show of my own. I'm also working on some soundtrack music right now for a documentary. I don't know if you've heard of this podcast series called the Telepathy Tapes.
Oh, I've never
I
heard.
super highly recommend it. I mean, especially for anybody who's feeling scared, who's feeling sad, who's feeling angry, um, being in this country. And the telepathy tapes, I mean, it starts out as an exploration of severely autistic nonverbal people and their powers of telepathy.
Hmm.
Many of them can hear thoughts, and their mothers, caregivers, teachers who are willing to go against the scientific paradigm that they were raised within and recognize this phenomenon happening, and actually sometimes participate, it is a real thing. And people are doing it all the time. And these nonverbal folks, now that there is this what is known as assisted communication, they call themselves spellers because somebody had the brilliant idea. I think it goes back to the 90s of, hey, what if we hand them iPads and teach them how to spell? Or, just pointer cards with letters. So people who have not been able to communicate with us, language users up till now are now able to. And the things that they are telling are just mind blowing. By the end of episode 10 of the telepathy tapes, if your head is still attached to your neck, I will take you out to dinner because it's actually amazing what the possibilities of consciousness are and tapping into the unified plane of consciousness, which we all are actually a part of. This, even this experience of ourselves as individuals and separate from each other is an illusion of the body. And all of these illusions that come of the body, time, all of these ways that we experience being alive, um, the telepathy tapes is here to blow that wide open. And in it, I think, is a map for how to get out of here. This place that we have found ourselves in politically and socially, there is so much hope and so much inspiration in the telepathy tapes. And now they're making a documentary film, and I'm working on soundtrack music for it. So I'm so excited to be a part of that team and serve that project because I couldn't believe more deeply in its potential to change the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely gonna have to check it out.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, for sure. And my final question, I ask this to every single one of my guests that I have on right now. Um, Usually music lovers, it's impossible to answer the question, what is your top five favorite songs of all time or top five favorite albums of all time? So just in this moment right now, recently, what are a few songs that have, you know, been in your playlist or been playing on the radio? What's some music that you've been loving recently?
Um, Gosh, let's see. Um, Let me see. I'm always bad at pulling names out of the air. I mean, I love Bon Iver, and I'm excited that Justin is releasing new music in this moment. It's beautiful as usual. Um, I got when I was in New York and I was living this really high pressure life. Um, I got into Bonnie Light Horseman, which is the band of Anais Mitchell, who's the writer of the Hadestown show. And she has this awesome band now that she's a part of. Um, and she sent me their new record before it was released a bunch of months back. And then I went back into their previous records and got really into their thing. And it was such a, I used, just put in my, ear pods with the noise canceling and walk down the street in this beautiful, chill world of Bonnie Light Horseman. Gosh, who, I don't know. There's so many. There's so many. I love just kind of poking around and having the algorithm, help me discover things. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Bon Iver, I used to say it wrong all the time, and people would come with their pitchforks and their torches, like,
Uh,
say correctly, but
yeah.
great, great
Always
music.
somebody around with a pitchfork and a torch. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly, exactly. Well, thank you so, so much, Ani, for taking the time out of your, I'm sure, busy, busy schedule to talk to me. This was an absolute pleasure.
Pleasure for me too, Reagan. Thank you.
Yes, hopefully one day we can lift the screen and meet in person.
Yeah, yeah, amen. Yeah, totally. Well, in the meantime, thanks for your time too. Nice shirt. Yeah, cute. All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.